Obviously, a big thing in the world of analytics right now is GA and GA4. Like coming out, I don't really know what that is or what it means. I know we've talked about it a lot. Could you kind of tell us what's going on with that and what we've done with that?
So when we think about GA, GA came from Urchin, which was a California company. That was the first, that was sort of the predecessor to GA. And they purchased Urchin, I guess, around 2005, maybe-ish, 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. They started evolving and building on top of it. Back then, they could take these like log files that your web servers created, and they could crunch those and turn those into reports. And then separately, there's this idea of all of these JavaScript events that I was talking about earlier.
Right.
So that was kind of like what Google Analytics started with. Well, if we think about how old that is, the tech back then, websites didn't get as much traffic. The complexity of what they were crunching through wasn't as extensive. There weren't apps. A lot of things didn't exist when they started building, that product stack.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometime, later, they purchased a company called Firebase. Firebase had in its library, it's sort of like a suite of tools for mobile app development, and had its some kind of analytics in its library. Now, I don't know the exact reason why they made this decision, but the current version of Google Analytics is sort of like built on this legacy, and they kept adding features and expanding it, but it was sort of built on this strong foundation that's been around since they purchased Urchin. Firebase was kind of its own separate code base. It started with just this idea of capturing some of those key events and wasn't really built to do every last kind of possible item, sub-event, or whatever we'd like to call it, that you could capture. However, it most likely had a lot of benefits in how it was architected when it comes to scale. And the internet is so big right now, and the amount of traffic and events are so big.
Still growing.
Yes, exactly, and it will continue to grow. So I believe that a lot of the impetus for this, or my conjecture would be that they, that whatever the technology was that Firebase platform was built on, was underneath the hood, scales a whole lot better, and is more performant and ready for the future. So we have GA4 coming out. That's sort of an evolution of a product that came much later. And I would say in some ways is still more primitive than the prior version of Google Analytics.
Really?
Yeah, I would say because the prior version of Google Analytics had so much investment in feature expansion, it was very, very fleshed out with lots of different, ways to capture data, some of which have already been deprecated, lots of different filters and options in its configuration. But it was sort of architected with an old mindset and then adapted. Sort of some things stayed the same, even though the internet kept changing.
Yeah.
The new one is starting from a place where mobile apps were always a thing.
Yeah.
The new platform, is open to the idea that we could have applications within applications in virtual spaces, and
Right.
we've got across screens. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's I would say what we're looking at right now is just the fact that there is a transition when it comes to the new platform. Some of the things we were doing before don't translate easily. It doesn't store in exactly the same way. We don't necessarily have as many slots to put data in. However, it's forced people to rethink how they're tracking in the first place and possibly clean up a lot of their old issues. And, the main benefit being that it should scale well into the future.
Yeah.
There's a reason I believe that Google's making the investment in this new platform.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so, what does that mean for businesses who have their data in Google Analytics right now?
Because there is like a hard switch coming. Right?
It is a hard switch, yes. They've been talking about the switch though for years, so
It's kind of like Real ID, like.
Yeah.
In 2026, we're switching to Real ID.
Yep. It's one of those switches that they keep talking about. I do think this time they are going to make the switch. I mean, if all of this is predicated on what I think it is, which has more to do with the infrastructure underneath and wanting to upgrade that, they're going to want to turn some of that old infrastructure off.
Well, they already have a little bit, right?
I think they've done a lot of things to guide you away from creating new properties or using the old version of GA, but it's still there. I think, but we're hitting that deadline right now where things are going to stop working. Yeah. And only the people on the paid accounts will still have a little bit more runway. Okay. So we'll see. But yes, no one wants to fly blind. No one wants to be running a web program without, any measurement. So, I am hoping that, more companies catch up and get their GA4.
Yeah. Do you think the messaging is out there? Like it's coming and most companies are aware?
I think some people are, if we think about where this fits in, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of companies that have a digital presence, but not necessarily aren't a digital first company, they look at a lot of, these kinds of tools and they're like, I'm just getting my head wrapped around the old version of GA. Right. Like, they're still learning how to run digital programs. And so for those companies, I don't think they're ready to make a switch. The companies that have been very digitally focused, their challenge is a little bit different. They've been doing so much with the old version of GA that if they can't replicate or make comparable numbers in GA4, they don't use it. The problem that we're running into right now is they're not going to be able to use the old version.
Oh, they're being stubborn.
So
they're fighting the growing pains.
Yes. And the numbers are different. It calculates sessions differently. It counts things, differently. Attribution is completely confusing for someone who was using the old version of GA to the new version. And even more in depth than I could cover on a podcast, all the tiny nuances of the business rules of when this counts, but that one doesn't.
But we could tell you if you need GA4 consulting.
Yes, we can help you sort all. We can help you sort all of that out. Yes. But it's forcing people to recalibrate, their measurement and their performance metrics that they might have developed processes around for years now. Yeah, decades even.
Right, it's what they're comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah.